great pleasure this morning of introducing you to RJ Baylat and Alana Collicutt of the Alberta Spay Neuter Task Force, who will be our speakers for this first morning session on a community-based approach to free-roaming dog population management. And so the Alberta Spay Neuter Task Force is going to be sharing information with us today about their new innovative program, the Alberta Spay Neuter Task Force Dog Care and Control Program, which is a community-based, holistic, and humane approach to free-roaming dog population management. The ASNTF has designed the Dog Care and Control Program based on experience, knowledge, consultation, and research. And their goal is to advise communities with free-roaming dog populations, primarily Canadian First Nations communities, on how to increase the health and safety of both community members and their companion animals. So RJ is the recipient of the International Fund for Animal Welfare Outstanding Personal Commitment Award. He has traveled nationally and internationally to many animal protection groups' home bases in order to study and accumulate knowledge and ideas to better accommodate groups in animal rescue, protection, and education. And RJ is the co-founder of the Alberta Spay Neuter Task Force. And then Alana has worn many hats at the Alberta Spay Neuter Task Force in the last 6 years, including being a general volunteer, vice president, clinical operations manager as well. However, she says she found her strength and passion in the development and management of the Dog Care and Control Program. Alana has been focused on the Dog Care and Control Program for the last year and a half, and has brought her experience, skills, and diligence to this new program. So we're very excited to have them speaking about this today. Let's give them a warm welcome.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming. This is super exciting for us because we realized that the conversation piece surrounding First Nations communities and their animals is ever growing. And there's so many people wanting to be involved. So I know a lot of the faces here are familiar. There's a lot of new faces. We're so happy that CFHS had the conference in Alberta because we know there's so many grassroots organizations that are doing work in the communities, and there's a lot of communities that are reaching out for support. So thank you, CFHS, for having us, and thank you everyone for coming. So a little bit about, today we're going to talk about the ASNTF, mostly our Dog Care and Control Program, and then of course our program with the Siksika Nation Dog Care and Control Program. Unfortunately, Norman, he was just here, but he just stepped out. He went to the emergency response piece this morning because Siksika is under a flood warning right now, so he really felt there was a lot of value in attending that. Hopefully everyone had a chance yesterday to listen to Josh Lilchot. I believe Josh is in the back there. Hopefully everyone had a chance yesterday to listen to his great presentation about the history of the dog in the community. So again, thanks Josh for coming and being part of this weekend. So who we are. So the Alberta Spay Neuter Task Force partners with communities who request guidance, support, and resources to humanely manage their companion animal population in order to improve the safety of their community and the well-being of the animals. Our vision is humans and companion animals live in harmony in communities where compassion, respect, and kindness guide their actions. So our core programs. So our main program when we started the Spay Neuter Task Force obviously was Spay Neuter clinics, so on-site Spay Neuter clinics. Then we've kind of moved into the Dog Care and Control Program, disease management, so vaccine clinics, and then emergency response is not something we really planned to do, but it's something that's kind of happened. So some of our highlights. So our Spay Neuter clinics have been going on since inception. So for over 10 years now, we've been offering Spay Neuter clinics. And we weren't going to talk much about it because our piece is mainly surrounding the Dog Care and Control Program. But I thought it was important to talk a little bit about our Spay Neuter clinics. So our clinics are community-based, so all of our programs are really coming with the support and the guidance with the communities we work with. So our clinics are on-site, and we have funding from the community. So every clinic we do, we have some level of funding from leadership to put forward towards the clinic. We get the remainder of our funding through grants and then through fundraising. So there's some really important parts of our clinic. So to do a really short, I guess, summary of our clinics, one piece that's really important is our dispatch area. So the dispatch is our community engagement piece. So that's where we have teams that actually go door to door. They meet with community members, see some of the barriers that the communities face, and we help alleviate those barriers by transporting their animals to the clinic. Because some of the clinic models that we've seen in the past, they'll set up mobile units, but people are not able to bring their animals in. And we really want to focus on those free roaming, those large intact animals that often people are not able to get into their vehicles or they don't have kennels. So by going door to door, we're really able to focus on all the community in those remote areas. The next piece is tattoos. So all of our animals are provided with permanent identification. We use tattoos for a few reasons. There's a lot of organizations in the province that are working in a lot of the First Nations communities. So the tattoos are quick visuals. We've often explored using microchips, but the challenge there is that there's so many groups that are working in the communities, they would have to all be carrying wands when they go to the partner communities. So the tattoo is really easy, it's visible. And we do get a lot of calls from local municipalities, from the actual First Nation community themselves with animals that have our tattoo combination. So we're able to, return the animal to the owner, but we're also able to provide, if there was a dog bite, for example, we're able to provide a vaccine history to the healthcare nurses because that is something that we do get several calls on because we work closely with those healthcare providers. Each animal that we care for, we get an owner consent. So when we go door to door or where people bring their animals into the clinic, we go over the whole process. So the animals are vaccinated, they're dewormed, they're tattooed, spayed and neutered. So we get an owner consent, so there's no perception of us going into the community to take animals, because that's often a perception that we see in a lot of communities is they've either had bad history with some individuals or organizations. So we always stress that we're in the community to support the community. We're not there to take dogs. I always tell people I have 9 dogs of my own. I'm not there to take any dogs. So that's really important because, again, it's a relationship building in the communities so that there's a trust. So we do the actual, obviously the surgery. So we set up with about 13, we're doing a clinic in 2 weeks where we're running 13 surgical tables. So we have the capacity to do about 400 surgeries in a weekend. On average, we do about 250 to 300. And in addition to that, we also get upwards to 100 animals relinquished. So there's often a perception in communities that the dogs are stray. And we found that that's not the case, that most often the dogs do have an owner. It could be a community dog, it could be a loosely owned dog, so there may be a few people that are caring for the dog. But the true reality is most of the animals do have owners. So we really want to respect that, and again, our goal is to keep the dogs in the community. So we set up very high volume, obviously MASH style clinics. When we operate our clinics, we have the support of our local veterinarian body, the ABVMA. So each time we do a clinic, we get a letter of support from the community, the supporting veterinarians, so that we could put forth and get a temporary license to do our clinics. When the animal's done surgery, when they go home, we have someone that does the post-surgical care instructions. So we basically go over any of the concerns that could come up. We provide our contact information, and we also do follow-up calls on cases that we're concerned about, or we just wanted to do, especially with some of the female dogs, we're really concerned and want to make sure that we follow up to make sure they're doing okay. Should there be any problems post-surgical, we have relationships with all the surrounding veterinarians, so we make arrangements for the animal to go into the clinic just to be safe, to make sure there's nothing serious going on. So to date, we've spayed and neutered over 13,000 animals. We've also placed over 5,000 animals with the partner rescue organizations. So the animals that typically get surrendered are dogs that usually litters of pups, or sometimes we'll go to homes and they'll have 9 dogs or 6 dogs. So they're hoping just to be able to care for 3 or 4. So then we'll help them facilitate with a reputable organization to rehome the animal. So these are a list of some of our current partner communities. So we go as far north as Fort McMurray First Nation, as far south to the Blood Tribe First Nation. So we have a ever-growing list of communities that are reaching out for spay-neuter clinics, but also the dog care and control programs. So one of the things that we realized in doing this from the beginning is we knew that spay-neuter was one piece of many. And often when you go into a community or a First Nation community, there's the quick visual of a large amount of dogs. So that seems quite daunting, and there's often a lot of knee-jerk reactions. And what we realized, in order to see an immediate stabilization in the population, was to be able to provide high-volume spay-neuter. But we've also realized that spay-neuter is just one piece of the puzzle. And through these years, and the more that we provide these clinics, we're seeing a change in a lot of the communities we work with, wanting to address animal welfare issues and truly getting to the bottom of the dog populations in the communities and the dog-human relations. So this one we now tie into our dog care and control program, which I'll let Alana go over.
Okay, thanks, RJ. So I guess we'll jump right into the Task Force Dog Care and Control Program. As you can see here, we have 7 components. It's comprehensive. And our program is based on a combination of our knowledge, experience, research, especially reviewing the International Coalition of Animal Management publications, input from stakeholders and partner communities. We've kind of created 7 crucial components to a successful community-based dog care and control program. So we've got education, legislation and enforcement, registration and identification, access to spay-neuter, holding facilities and rehoming centers, access to veterinary care, and controlling access to resources. Our current partners in dog care and control programming are, gosh, I mean, I just created this slideshow a few days ago and I already have some communities to add. These communities are at different stages of development in dog care and control programming. Our Task Force Dog Care and Control Program began in May of 2016 with a pilot project in Siksika Nation. And we're going to talk about that quickly at the end of this presentation. Then we have Ermineskin Cree Nation, which is Josh Littlechild at the back there, Tsuut'ina and Saddle Lake Cree Nation, as well as we're talking with Big Stone in Wabasca and some First Nations around Fort McMurray. Okay, so for the task force, we developed these values and beliefs related to our dog care and control program. So, of course, we definitely 100% believe in order to have a successful program, it has to be community-based. The governance of dog care and control belongs in the local government. Our goal in this community-based program is to provide guidance to communities that are interested in dog care and control while providing training, knowledge, support, and experience so that the communities can independently manage their program in the future. Invitation and support is a key belief for us. We don't solicit communities per se. We help communities that reach out for our help. So we need to be invited and we need to be supported by leadership. Of course, sustainability is really important. We've seen in the last 20 years, First Nation communities will start a dog care and control program only to find the next year they won't get the budgeting because perhaps chief and council has changed and there's just not a priority on dogs anymore. So we really believe in keeping the program sustainable. We believe in having a presence in the community. So we really feel it's important that there is always somebody available in the community to help people with any issues that they're having. And like Norman or Josh at the back, they are always in the community. They are always stopping in, in community members' homes that are requesting help and responding to dog bite reports and everything. So presence is really, really important. It's a good reminder and encouragement for communities to be committed to being responsible dog owners. And that leads us into the responsibility of ownership, which is, in general, the task force really wants to encourage the responsible ownership of pets and providing basic care to pets. And we are always supported by Chief and Council, who actually want the same things. And then humane methods. We believe in humane methods being written into the bylaw, and also just in the everyday actions of the task force and the community administration and animal control officers. Before we jump into each of the 7 components, I'm just going to talk about a couple of misconceptions, just address those. So it's been a pretty popular topic of conversation within rescues and spay neuter organizations, how ineffective the approach of removal of quote-unquote strays is in our First Nation communities. It is a tool, but on its own, it is not sustainable and it is not effective alone. So why removing dogs doesn't work? So when we've gone and done demographics in communities, we recognize that there's only like a 3 to 5% of the dog population is actually indeed truly stray. So we know that if we're going into a community and we're removing a large number of dogs, that we are indeed removing dogs from families. So we know that for sure. Of course, it's not a sustainable practice and often results in compassion fatigue and lack of resources for rescues. So it's also been suggested that removing a large number of dogs may actually lead to redistribution of the dogs that are living on the fringes of the community. So every community has a carrying capacity. So if there's a large removal of dogs, especially if the removal is just based on an organization being in the community and catching up all the friendly dogs, the ones on the fringes will eventually move in and may actually cause more safety concerns. Removing large numbers of dogs, in the case where the Alberta Spay Neuter Task Force has been there, for instance, may encourage community members to replace their confiscated pet that may be fully vetted, vaccinated, tattooed, dewormed, and spayed or neutered with a new dog who is not spayed or neutered, and then we start the whole process again. The dogs can also be replaced with, dogs that have been removed from the community may be replaced with dogs that aren't really suitable for our northern weather. So we want to avoid that at all costs too. So our suggestion is always, we know that there are communities that as a last resort will announce a cull of dogs, and we know that there's resources available in Alberta to have rescues address that situation and help the community remove the dogs instead of forcing the community into doing culls. But even in that situation, we really recommend that there's some due diligence. Even if the leadership is coming to you and saying, we want all the dogs removed. There are too many dogs, they're all stray, we don't want them in the community, they're a nuisance. We really, really encourage you to go door to door and try and confirm that the dog does not have an owner, especially if it is a really healthy, large breed, double-coated, fully vetted, healthy weight, no injuries, let's really consider keeping that dog in that community. Mandated tethering is also a common kind of go-to for First Nation communities. This is the second misconception we'll talk about today. I think everybody in this room would agree that tethering or tying up dogs will not create a safer community. It is not a long-term approach to dog population management. Research has proven that tying up dogs actually can create a very dangerous situation. In fact, so dangerous that some municipalities have actually banned tethering altogether. We also know that it's very psychologically and physiologically damaging for dogs to be tied up for life. So if there is a major incident in a First Nation community, sometimes a knee-jerk reaction of chief and council is to mandate that all the dogs are tied. And certainly we can sympathize with why they're doing that, but it is not a long-term approach. So here's just an example of a leaflet that we have that we can give to leadership and community members about tying up your dog and what the risks are, what some alternatives are to tying up. So here's our components again, the 7 components. Every First Nation community is different, so some communities are going to prioritize some components over others, depending on their unique circumstances. But for today, we're going to cover the first few here and suggest that they could be something that could be, that you could do in the short term. So legislation, bylaws are currently of great interest to First Nation communities. This has been a trend that probably started about 5 years ago. As First Nations are sovereign nations, they have the freedom to develop and enforce laws in their nation. First Nation bylaws reduce the dependence on third-party enforcement agencies and are seen by chief and councils across Canada as an exercise in sovereignty. Often the first bylaw that First Nation communities are interested in is a dog bylaw. The task force has worked really closely with a number of lawyers to help communities to develop culturally appropriate and humane dog bylaws. In fact, to help reduce the cost to our partner communities, we are just about ready to release our dog bylaw template, which is going to give First Nations a starting point and hopefully reduce the legal fees associated with the development of a dog bylaw. When consulting with leadership, administration and the community members, there are 3 main areas that they would like covered in a dog bylaw. So the first one is management of behavior dogs or management of quote unquote dangerous dogs, animal welfare, so have some basic care requirements in the bylaw, and then of course an overall kind of tone to encourage responsible guardianship of dogs. Every community has a different way of developing and passing bylaws. For Josh's Ermineskin community, they were passed by chief and council, but then had to be ratified by membership. In Siksika, chief and council had to do 3 readings, all on separate days at their chief and council meetings, and they passed the bylaw. So every community is going to have a different process. Once the bylaw is passed, of course, we know that just having a bylaw is not really useful unless there's enforcement. So in our experience, some communities, depending on the size, will add enforcement duties to existing employees, such as their security team or their tribal police. Others will hire a dedicated ACO, maybe full-time, maybe part-time, maybe just on call, depending on the size of the community. The task force can help provide animal control officer job descriptions, we can advise on recruitment, and we can provide training. Being an animal control officer in a First Nation community is very different than being a bylaw officer in a large municipality. Therefore, the training that we provide caters to enforcement officers working in a free-roaming dog environment. For example, we discourage the use of rabies poles, as this isn't really an effective tool for a First Nation environment where the dogs are generally free roaming. So we spend a lot of time teaching officers how to use humane traps. The task force can also help with creating processes, report and investigation templates, and can also advise on the procurement of supplies and tools for dog population management. Okay, and the next component is registration and identification. Licensing is a really great way to spread the word about bylaws and to collect demographics of the community's dog population. In some of our larger partner communities, this is a really big job. The task force has templates for registration databases, including pictures of each dog, and templates for the registration document. Having pictures of the dogs of every licensed dog is super helpful for bylaw enforcement because we know that the dogs may eventually lose their collar or at least their license tags. So having pictures of them really helps. We like to encourage door-to-door visits to kick off the registration campaign because it really gives everybody an opportunity to engage with the community. So the task force and community volunteers can head out to each home, especially in the populated areas, and speak with the owners and license the dogs. Dog owners are given a collar if they need one and a community license tag. This is a great time to answer questions about the bylaw, share information about basic care requirements, and it's also a great time to identify possible strays or welfare cases. As the bylaw at this point might be new in the community, or maybe it doesn't even exist yet, we suggest for at least the first year that licensing is free and can actually be lifelong. This really encourages the community to jump in and get excited about licensing their pets. One of the greatest things after a registration campaign is when community members or leadership look out the window and they're able to see all of these dogs with collars and licenses, and so often they'll say something like, "Wow, I did not know that all of these dogs were owned." So it's a really great visual for leadership. Okay, so in the short term, we definitely want to start talking about holding facilities and rehoming centers. So after the bylaws are passed and maybe enforcement is getting sorted out, it's really important that the community secures a holding facility. But the assumption that a First Nation community would require an animal control facility creates a huge funding barrier for chief and councils, as the costs obviously associated with the construction of a new building and the overhead can be really overwhelming. So the task force recommends that communities outsource the animal control facility, just like many other municipalities do. And this would avoid unnecessary expenses like the wages for employees, quarantining, training costs, overhead, construction costs. One of the most important things that I do when advising in a community on dog population management is to facilitate relationships between community and animal welfare organizations. So ideally, impounded or stray dogs would be held with shelters, rescues, perhaps a professional boarding facility, or a veterinary clinic. If the animal is not returned to the owner or is not claimed, ownership of the dog can be transferred to a partner rescue or shelter. And we do that a lot for Siksika Nation and also with Ermineskin recently, and we're very grateful to the rescues that help us with this and the shelters. Okay, and on the short term, of course, we have to get into education. I kind of use the term education and engagement. They mean the same thing to me. So education can take many forms, but in the short term, we suggest stakeholder management. So engage all the stakeholders by forming a stakeholder committee. So that would be health clinics, RCMP, teachers, lands and resource management departments. It is the rescues that are active in the area, leadership and the task force. It's everybody. And another short-term education initiative is public awareness booths. The ACO or band staff or maybe community member volunteers can start to man public awareness booths at these events. And they can, at that time, share information about the bylaws and also talk about dog bite prevention, which we think is a really important initiative to start with, dog bite prevention. A good dog bylaw includes a section that covers animal welfare. I think everyone in this room has experienced high vet care bills. We absolutely acknowledge that it is really hard and very sad when an animal has to be removed from a loving home because an owner is not able to afford the vet care. When advising on dog care and control programs, we always ask leadership how they would like to manage these cases. The standard response from Chief and Council in our experience is that they have an expectation that community members with pets will provide and pay for vet care, and in cases where they can't, that the bylaw is enforced. Overall, Chief and Council, in our experiences, would like to encourage their nation members to be responsible dog guardians. This is an example of the inside of a new dog bite prevention brochure that we just published. We truly believe that many dog bites can be avoided altogether with the right information. And in fact, we've just applied for funds to produce a professional video titled Interacting Safely with Free Roaming Dogs. And we are super excited about this project. So cross your fingers for us. The audience could be utility companies, community members, rescues, veterinarians. It could be, the audience is just huge. So we're pretty excited about it. Grooming, of course. Many of us will have recognized an increase in the ownership of small breed dogs, especially Shih Tzu type breeds or Bichons. And they do require regular grooming, but sometimes owners aren't aware of this when they get their puppy, their brand new puppy. So we do have a pamphlet here for some general grooming tips. And then we have a leaflet also about the common myths about dogs. So I don't need to leave water out for my dogs, they eat snow, or it doesn't cost anything to have a dog, or any size or breed of dog can live outdoors. So now I am running out of time, I think, here. 10 minutes, okay. So we'll just go over the last 3 components of a dog care and control program. These might be considered long-term goals, but again, every community is different and they'll prioritize accordingly. Controlling access to resources is a big component. This is where things like an introduction of community dog-free zones might come into play, and that would be, the dog-free zones would be addressed in the bylaw if this were the case. It's about formalizing the dog food or pet food bank, securing garbage containers. It's also about budgeting and finding the funding to be sustainable. And of course, we can't talk about controlling access to resources without discussing funding. The largest barrier to the development of a dog care and control program in a First Nation community is funding. But we have had great success with providing advice to communities regarding grants. We even have templates for proposals. It absolutely is possible. Long term, you could be looking at expansion of education. So school programs, perhaps some curriculum, Like IFA's Living in a Good Way with Dogs Education Pack, we're a huge supporter of. We're so grateful to IFA for developing that program. If you guys haven't had a look at it, please do. It's pretty amazing. Also, this is where we can start, the community can start doing adult and child workshops, maybe things like build your own doghouse or basic grooming workshops for the small breed owners or the large breed owners. And then, of course, a continuation of public awareness at community events. So veterinary care, access to veterinary care. So the component related to access to veterinary care is a component that we devote to remote communities, such as fly-in communities. And that's because, like I've already discussed, most of our communities are within 2 hours of a vet clinic. So, and because chief and councils that, like partners that we're currently working with, would like vet care bills to be the responsibility of owners. So you'll see in the Siksika dog care and control program that there is no component for access to veterinary care because they have access to local veterinarians. Access to spay neuter, of course, is naturally one of our favorite components. Incidentally, our partners in dog care and control programming were actually initially partners in spay neuter programming. And what an advantage there is to beginning up, to helping a First Nation community with the development and implementation of a dog care and control program when the population is already somewhat stabilized. It does make our lives a lot easier. Of course, we can't forget to mention the amazing local rescues who work tirelessly to spay, neuter, return animals during our spay, neuter off-season. So, the Siksika Dog Care and Control Program, the SDCCP, this is the pilot project we started 2 years ago. This is a true partnership between Siksika Nation and the Alberta Spay Neuter Task Force. We've been active in Siksika Nation since 2008. We've spayed and neutered 2,000 animals. In March of 2016, there was a particularly serious dog attack in one of the populated areas of the town site. The senior manager of justice, Diane Breaker, in Siksika was asked by Chief and Council to come up with some long-term solutions, and that's when she contacted RJ. We worked with Diane and her security supervisor to create a plan to manage some of the unsupervised dogs in the area, and a really great partnership was born. So the dog care and control program in Siksika was formed in May of 2016. Siksika Nation, we think, is a real champion of this program, and we've seen the fruits of its labor be a real benefit to other communities like Ermineskin. The mission of the Siksika Dog Care and Control Program is to improve the safety and health of Siksika community members and their animals. Norman Running Rabbit Jr., like RJ mentioned, is a the full-time Siksika Animal Control Officer. He's seriously one of my favorite people in the whole world. He is compassionate, realistic, and will do anything to help an injured animal. He's a role model for future First Nation dog population management programs, and he truly is an everyday hero, and he's in the emergency track, the emergency response track today. So I wish he was here, but I'll point him out to you next time I see him. The components of the Siksika Dog Care and Control Program are much the same as ours, with the exception there is no number 7 access to veterinary care because the community has access to local veterinarians. Their values and beliefs look a lot like ours as well, but they've also added in things like a soft approach. So we know that if a community has brand new bylaws, they've never been the dogs have never been managed, the owners have never been asked to manage the dogs. So we do believe in a soft approach, as many of the communities do, not going out and looking for infractions, but actually responding to calls, engaging with the community, trying a few options to help a community member instead of jumping right into enforcement. And we think that's important for at least the first year of the existence of the bylaw. The new dog bylaw in Siksika was passed by Chief and Council on June 30th of 2016. And here's an example of the dog bite stats. So you can see dog bites in 2016 versus 2017, 35% reduction in dog bites. So we're really, really proud of that. These kind of stats allow the program to be sustainable because Chief and Council see the benefits to the community, to public safety, of continuing the funding for a program. So it's, we are really proud of these stats. We have a goal to reduce them a further 10% this year. And it really is all thanks to the animal control officers' diligence in responding to calls and to dog bite reports and the management of repeat bite offenders, because it's really incredible. You can see in May of 2016, the blue line, when we were able to start enforcing the bylaw, the bites actually went up, and that's because there was a lot of campaigning about making sure you report dog bites, but also because there were a number of repeat bite offenders that were biting on a pretty regular basis that we began to manage. So that's how we see the decrease. Registration and licensing, we've already talked a bit about that. So because I have 2 minutes left, I will skip that. We do have some great demographics that have come out of the registration and licensing program. So 69% of the dogs are fixed in Siksika. The 65% of the population is 100% free roaming. So that was really interesting to collect. And then, of course, this is our billboard, a really large billboard that's been up in Siksika for 2 years. And it is a constant reminder to all of us and the community what an important job that we're doing. So we don't really have time for questions, but that's okay because we do have a roundtable this at the very end of the day. And so if there are any questions, that would be a great time to come and talk to us and discuss some of these initiatives. This is an example of a lot of the different things we can do to help a community, and that is included in the handbook that's on the table. And we do thank you for attending. I'm going to ask RJ if he has anything to say.
I think that's everything. The one really important message is that we work, especially in Siksika Nation, we work very closely with the healthcare nurses. So through the registration process, because we acknowledge that often the dogs do lose their tags and collars, like Alana said, that if the dogs are spayed and neutered, we're able to attach their tattoo number to their license number. So that's also another reference. So again, we do get multiple calls a day from local communities and municipalities that are trying to get information on the dog. So that's proven to be very helpful. And we also provide, the information stays with the community members. So they get information regarding their animal license, but in addition, when they get spayed and neutered, we leave all their medical records with the owners and reminders for follow-up vaccines. So, and we're done.
Yeah.
That was we can't talk
And that was
anymore.
45 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you very much, guys.